This is the data for the 2021-2022 long-term suspension appeals for, that the Board of Ed has received for this past school year. So this past school year, the board has received 75 long-term suspension appeals. Excuse me. 72 was reviewed by the board. 3 were not reviewed. The reason why the 3 were not reviewed is because one went to the spam folder, another one, the days to appeal had expired, and then the last one, appealing to walk for graduation, which is not something the board oversees.
What was that last one?
Appealing to walk for graduation. So the student appealed because they wanted to walk for graduation, but that's not something that you all would oversee. You went to the superintendent's office. So based on the appeals for this past school year, 34 appeals were upheld or had no changes based on what the superintendent had given the student. 36 were confirmed in part, and then 2 were reversed or expunged. So this shows you the percentages as well. And then here is a breakdown of the schools based on where the students attended. So as you can see, Edison had the highest amount of appeals submitted, with Franklin Upper and Monroe Upper, and then Soda, the 3 of them was a tie as the next highest of schools that students attended. This shows you the length of what the superintendent gave the students based on their suspensions. So 26 of the appeals from the students received 45 days from the superintendent, which was the highest. So this shows the code of conduct areas that were violated. The ones that are in black are the ones that initiated the level 4, which are the appeals that the board would review. The rest of them may have been in conjunction with the fact that the student violated a level 4 and 8, but they also did some of the other blue that's up there. In terms of demographics, so when it came to grade levels, we had the highest were 23 were 9th graders, with 10th graders being the second highest, which included 20 students. In terms of age, 22 was the highest who were age 15, so that's 29% of those appeals, of the 75 appeals were 15 years old. And then age 16 was the second highest.
Commissioner, would you mind going back to that?
Hold on 1 second.
Thank you. Would you mind going back to that previous slide? I want to notes. Okay. I may want to comment on this. So.
Let me know when you're done.
Okay.
You're good?
Yes.
Do you want me to stay on this one as well?
No, it's not.
Yes. In terms of gender, our females had higher appeals submitted, which were 46 female students and then 29 male students. So that's 61% of the 75 students that had appealed. Race, 65% were black, which are about 49 students.
So there's more females on that last screen, committing incidents than males, what they're showing?
So based on the appeals that,
Say it again, I'm sorry.
so based on the appeals that the board reviewed, 61% or 46 students identified as female. So in terms of like overall, I'm not sure of that data. This is specific to what the board received in terms of appeals. So out of the 75 appeals that was received, 46 were female students.
So we don't know if that's consistent with.
Right,
those that don't come to us.
right. We don't know yet. We don't know which gender is higher.
Is there any way of knowing that, determining that? Has a,
So is the question which gender of student has a higher rate of incidence overall?
I don't think that mic is on.
It is recorded, it's just not for you guys.
We did the race. Were there any questions with this one? The race. In terms of students with disabilities, we had 23% of students who identify with the disability, which are 17 students out of the 75 students that appeals were received. And then, so 57 was of students, or 76% was they did not have was not a student with a disability, basically. And that is all I have. Are there any questions? Do you have two mics? One is next to you.
So, when you say disability, you talking about IEP?
Yes, so student with disability, whether it's an IEP, a 504 plan.
Okay, so I have one other question here. I know for a fact that in past years, a lot of parents didn't even know about the appeal process. It was a big thing here in the district. Are people being made aware of the option to appeal?
So
Are we getting that message out? That's what
So to say, I'm not sure of what is being said at the school level, but I do know we just updated our appeal form for the board, and it was sent out to the chief of schools to give to their principals to let families know of the updated form and whatnot, and it's of course on our website, but.
As part of the suspension process, when a student gets suspended, within their packet is information with regard to how to appeal. Additionally, at the long-term hearing office, when a student attends their hearing, they are also provided the information there as well. They're also provided the information at links where alternative education is provided. And then on our website, we also have the information. That's what Charisma was just talking about. We went ahead and made that process more user-friendly, so the form is fillable, and families are able to also submit the form in person. They can do it fax, email, they can call us and get more information. So that process has been streamlined. I have not had any complaints, and this is how I'm as I look over the years that we started really picking up the suspension appeals. In the beginning, there were lots of calls about what is this process. We don't get any calls about what is this process. We don't get any calls about I didn't know, so the timeline ran out. We're not getting those kinds of things anymore. So I'm encouraged by that. And when I call, most people know. It's also in it's also in the code of conduct as well. So those are the ways that people can know.
Okay, I have a question as well. So I was looking at the data, and I see, some of our larger school communities. That makes sense as far as the disproportionate number of students that are making appeals, as well as those pain points when we look at ninth and 10th grade, and that transition with the 7th grade. That definitely reinforces our understanding of the wraparound services that are needed at those points in that 7th, 8th grade transition that supports that. My question is around the disability piece in regards to, we recognize the district is out of compliance in some levels, and there are many parents and families, caregivers that are talking about their children not receiving the services when it comes to their IEP being executed as it should or updated in compliance to what they expect. And so when the appeals come through, I've noticed that it'll be noted that this was not based on a component of their disability. I forget the exact manifestation of the disability. But if we're out of compliance and it's a known fact that things are not completely being reinforced as they should be, I think we might want to look at that process and determine how are we making those determinations? What is the criteria to determine this is not a manifestation if we're not even executing properly? That was a long way to a short answer.
So before the, so what happens was that when a student is recommended for long-term suspension that identifies a student with a disability, they do receive a manifestation hearing. And so at that hearing is what, is determined if this, based on their disability, if it's a result of that. And when they find that it's not, that's how, they end up getting the long-term suspension. But there are, there are laws that govern, if it is a result of their disability, this is how long they are allowed to get. But if it's not because of it, they're kind of treated like a general student.
Yeah, my argument is the accuracy, the subjective nature of making that determination.
So as it relates to the manifestation hearing is not, as Charisma says, it's separate and apart. There's two different hearings. And the manifestation hearing, at least that I understand the process to be, the special education department runs that component of it. I know there are some concerns about what's happening with special education students, but typically the manifestation hearing process, at least for this past year, I can say that students with disabilities, there was no discrepancies between the ones that were forwarded over to us. We did have, sometimes you'll see where in the IEP or the behavior plan that, the student might get aggravated for, or maybe frustrated, increased frustration over such and such. They're supposed to go through a diagnostic in the hearing before it gets to the hearing officer. And so the board cannot step into that jurisdiction because the hearing officer even does not dive into that component. We only provide it peripherally so that the board can understand that the student does have, something, but it's done diagnostically separately. Additionally, there are 3 reasons why a student with a disability would get more than the prescribed 15 days, which is maximum for students with disabilities, and that is for extreme bodily harm, serious bodily harm, and it's usually a limb, up to death. And then for weaponry, and that's guns and ammunition. And then also the last one, I believe, is if they're going to inflict on themselves. So those are the only ones. So the board, for the board's knowledge.
So Kalia, what is maybe I ask you, Dr. Black, what is the definition or criteria that would elevate, well, not so much elevate to our attention, but that a student with disability would be given a suspension? I don't know, because I'm thinking that, if we've got a student, or maybe that's you, Adrian, or in terms of,
try.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
What should we, when we are reviewing those appeals, I'm always a little confused about, what the definition is, because I hear you all say, well, it's not a part of their manifestation. Well, what is a part of the manifestation that would, let me get it right. What is the manifestation such that they're not suspended, I guess is what I should say.
So students with disabilities can get suspended. They can get suspended.
Yeah, but what's the criteria?
Typically, they get those 15 days. And the long-term suspensions, just generally, are those suspensions that are above 5 school days. So if they're going to get more than 5, it would be because they had a manifestation of something. If they did not get a manifestation, then they would be treated like a regular student, and then they would be coming to us.
Yeah, I don't think that's what I'm asking. I think I'm asking.
I think you're asking when are I think you're asking when are the situations when it's determined that it's not a manifestation, right? So what specific kind of criteria? And I really think it's student specific, right? Because you're looking at specific behavior, like what are the typical behaviors. So if you have a child that usually turns over their desk, right? And that's known to be like a part of the child's behavior and determined to be a part of the child's disability. If they do something along those lines, then I could see in the manifestation determination, like, okay, this is a manifestation because we know there's a pattern of this. But if it's something completely outside of the scope, not determined to be within the diagnosed, right, IEP, right, disability, then it could be, okay, this is not a manifestation, right, of the disability. So there are the CSC folks, are experts in this area, but, that's really, my understanding of the process. And I think Dr. Black has something to add.
Yes.
So, and I'll just, before I pass the, so we could just assume, and you all always say it, that it is, when we have these appeals, that it is not a part of their manifestation. But I didn't understand that.
So I want to make one correction. So a student can have an IEP for all kinds of things: academic issues, behavior issues, social emotional issues. There can be an IEP that's developed because a student has a need in a specific area. Say a student has an academic IEP, they have a need for ELA support, they're dyslexic. They start to fight, right? The manifestation says, is this fight as a result of the fact that they have an issue with reading? No, right? Potentially not. Then that would not be a manifestation, so you get the consequence for the fight because it's not as a result of you having a disability or an exceptional need. And so you take them each, to Adrian's point, you should take each one of them separately. What is the need that the IEP generates, and what is the behavior? And is there a connection between those two things or not? Okay. And then that generates the consequence or the remedy that we then offer for behavior.
But you would not see a yes to a manifestation of a disability in a long-term hearing, because if it's a yes, it automatically gets overturned.
Right.
So you will never see a manifestation of a disability, or you should never see a manifestation of
We don't
disability
get a
in
yes.
a LTS, because it would be immediately overturned if it was a manifestation of the disability.
And they can appeal their manifestation hearing,
Right.
but not to this board. They would appeal to the CSE.
Now, the question, go ahead.
You go first, because I have a question about a different slide. Okay.
So the question the question becomes then is, does every student have an IEP? So that if a determination is made, and if it comes to us, that we know that we are sure that the appeal is not a part of the manifestation.
Any student with a disability has an IEP.
Okay.
Only the students with disabilities have IEPs. Not every student that you would see would have an IEP, right? And so individual education plan is specifically for students with disabilities. So that's.
Okay, so my next question is it adhered to, the IEP plan?
If it's not adhered to, that would be a manifestation of its disability and overturned. So if someone's IEP is not adhered to, and we've had this, right, missed counseling because we haven't had a counselor, missed social work sessions, because that would overturn that suspension. That would be a manifestation of the disability. The student would not have the suspension. Okay. So those are areas.
Did you mention it in one of your slides?
It's on. Yep.
Did you mention it in one of the slides? What percentage of students that are suspended do actually try to appeal?
Now that we are hoping to calculate once we do get the suspension data. So I think the suspension data is still being put together. So once we do that, then we can compare it to the appeals. We know we have had 17.
Right, I mean, because I appreciate all the data around those who appeal.
Yeah, right.
But the bigger elephant in the room
is
how many people are suspended, where they're
Suspended,
suspended for what,
Yeah.
are they this, that, and the
So
third.
we knew we were going to have to address that elephant in the room, but at least in terms of what the board is in charge of, what's running through their office, we wanted to make sure that you all have this information. We'll come back again when we have the suspension data, because you'll see a wider array of information. You'll also get short-term suspension information as well as long-term suspension information and other incidents. This is only long-term suspension appeals, so this is only a fraction of.
I just wanted to clarify too, Dr. Jallo, that you're asking for all suspension data. Is that what it is, long-term and short-term?
Yeah, what, I guess the point I'm trying to make, if you're trying to make some determination about where you stand in this district around suspensions and understanding if you wanted to do something about it or you were satisfied with where it was, you have to look at suspension data, not the few that came up the funnel that decided to appeal.
But
It only
doesn't-
gives you part of the picture.
No, and I get that because I don't know where we've actually ever looked at short-term suspensions other than code of conduct work. And I know that the committee, which we're going to have to address that another time because the committee right now is predominantly white. And I just want to throw that out there, but it sure is. And we're going to have to address that. But that was some of the work that they were doing previously with Children's Agenda, looking at suspensions. And what short-term suspensions, and I do think if schools are following the code of conduct, then that should correlate to less suspensions naturally anyway. But yeah, so we'll have to figure that out.
And I appreciate the acknowledgement that this needs to be a broader scope and that information is forthcoming. I'm interested to see that because thank you, Dr. Jallo, for bringing out the relevance of how much we're actually missing, in addition to actually getting real student suspensions, like our comprehensive understanding, because that's where we'll understand the level of parent awareness in the appeal process through who's been suspended and then how many are we actually getting versus this snapshot. But I would also like to see a correlation. I would love to see short-term suspensions. I think Vice President LeBron mentioned that. And I don't know if there's a way to capture, but out of class, where a student was not necessarily suspended, but they were removed from class or sent to an administrator instead, because we saw suspension rates go down on some levels. But it didn't mean that the child was in class, and they might have still been in the building, but they were removed elsewhere. I don't know if that's making sense. So I'd like to see like a full comprehensive conversation around the reality of all of those points of data, because that's where we're going to get the full picture, I believe.
But in addition to that, what that does is helps us to, it helps inform us of the work that we need to do academically. You know, because, you know, kids are going to be kids and they're going to, act up. But at the same time, if we are not provided them with the right academic programs, where they can have their attention on their programs, we're going to see these numbers go up. So, I'm hoping, with our CTE programs and some other programs that, this will help these numbers to go down. Because I remember when I campaigned, my very first campaign, and there were 14,000 suspensions, and we're talking about back in 2005, and most of those were between that 7th through 9th grade level, and most of those were black boys. So, this would help us with our instruction.
And on the other point,
It's on.
oh no.
He can hear it.
I apologize, guys. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah, no, it was not on. I looked at the green button and I pushed it on. So now it is on. Thank you. And so the other part of that is I do want to also consider the conversation when it comes to classroom teachers in this model. So we're looking at our students. We're looking at a disproportionate number of students that are suspended, maybe put out of class, but also we recognize that some of our school buildings that have not had adequate supports in the classroom on some level. So it's a conversation between classroom management, but also potentially lack of support for some of our educators and how they are getting the support to deal or better manage the classrooms when it comes to student behavior. So all of these things are kind of manifesting, but I mean, we can go down the rabbit hole with the data, but I think they're strong points.
So we could pull the suspension data from Power School, and it's right there. We have it right in front of us. So that's pretty easy to get to the board if you want that. The thing I will say about, and I want to look at the slide with the grade level data, right? Because the grade level and age, right, don't line up. So you're going, what you're starting to see in the 9th graders are probably repeat 9th graders, which then the question comes to say, okay, what is happening to students that are repeat students, right, that are also behavioral, right? So there's the data from the questions that come from this should be a little bit more provide us an opportunity to do a little bit of deeper dive in terms of who's being suspended, right? How many times, right? We're starting to see appeals of ninth graders that now should be 10th graders, but are still ninth graders, that may be 11th graders that are still ninth graders, right? And then what are we doing programmatic-wise to support those kids and make sure that they're on track for graduation as well as have support behavior?
So if we go back to that slide about with the schools there, and I looked at Franklin Lower, they had like 12 suspensions. Oh, no, I'm sorry, it was Edison. So just as an example, if we're looking at, maybe y'all can't answer that question here, but if we're talking about the suspensions, the long-term suspensions, what kind of supports, as an example, do we think that we could provide Edison with? Of course, you know, when they presented last night and we saw the film, they're doing some work, but what else do we need to have over at Edison?
Yeah. Can you hold the mic?
Oh,
Yeah, sorry. It's for the recording. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. So, just as an example, with Edison having, you know, 12 students suspended, give us an example of what kinds of supports would we put at Edison in order to lower that, or if we can't answer that right now?
Well,
I just want to caution, those are the number of appeals from Edison, right? That, yeah, but with that, I hear a lot of talk about what you want to do for the kids. I would like to see you disaggregate the data by who's doing the suspending, right? Because oftentimes, certain suspensions come from a certain place or certain classrooms or a certain time of the day. And so before you act on the kids, let's act on the adults and the structures and the timing, you know? So I would just caution around making sure that whatever is done to staff and to students. It's not just the students being suspended. Somebody's doing the suspending as well. Right. So, but having said that, still as an example, and I get what Dr. Jallo is saying, but what would we do in this case when we've got a high number? Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. This is what I'm gonna do for you. You know what happens? I get into it, I forget. So, what would we do for, you know, a high rate of suspension, say at Edison? What we would do? Give some examples of that, if you can.
Well, I think it depends on the student what level of support, right? You know, so you're talking like could be a Center for Youth support, right? It could be some counseling and social work support. If it's academic, you're looking at, you know, is there anything you could do to a student's schedule, right? You know, to provide them support that way, right? Are you looking at OCR, online credit recovery? Are you supervising that, right? There's many opportunities. We do have to, and we have to look at alternative options for our kids. That if you're an 11th grader, and should be an 11th grader, and you're still 9th grade credits, right? What's the realism of you getting on track to graduate? And if you don't have that path to get there, what is your option but to do other things, right? You know, and I think we have to be clear on what it is. Programs like All City, how do you replicate that? Does that have to be a different school? Could it be replicated within a school, right? You know, so all things have to be explored, I believe.
And I do want to be mindful that Edison, and I think it might be Franklin too, have a huge student population. So when you look at their student cohort numbers, they are much more significant than some of our other schools. So you might see at one high school 100 kids graduating to Edison's 300, and so you will naturally see higher numbers is what I'm considering.
Something I also want to point out, even though this is just on the appeal side, what we noticed for even last school year, especially the ones that are in black on this slide, what happens, like for example, Edison, there may be a situation where there may be a fight, like a brawl, and so like maybe 3 or 4 students appeal in that one, right, and then that can drive up the numbers as well for the appeal. So I did want to point that out.
I also wanted to point out that one thing that we're looking at, and I know some board members also had the opportunity to go to links, there are sometimes where there are repeat students who are suspended, and sometimes we see where that trickles over and they appeal twice. The board does not necessarily look too kindly on that because it's the same incident, the same type of, but that might speak to what kind of interventions can take place. Obviously, if you are suspended for a fight incident at school and then you're put in the same place for remediation, then and then you go back to the same school and the same timeline and everything is still ripe for that same incident. it will show up this way. But we are encouraged, at least in terms of persons knowing how to appeal. They filled out the form well. There's very little follow-up at this point in terms of calling a parent and saying, hey, I think you want to appeal to your CSC, or hey, you have passed the 30 days to appeal, or you have, or I think you might need to talk to your principal because this student has a short-term suspension, not a long-term suspension, so I wanted to just highlight that at least the process for appealing seems to be doing what it is intended to do, and we are getting through numbers. I will say in comparison to years past, it's very hard to pull any real conclusions because we're coming out of the pandemic. And just to know that before the pandemic, we were around 100. The year before that, we were around 80. We're here at 75. It's kind of hard to say what's going on there.
And so I just needed, since this is being recorded, I need probably to be clear that we keep talking about Edison, but Edison may not even be in the top 2 with suspensions. These are just the appeals.
Right.
I know for a fact incident that happened at East where there was about 5 people involved and none of them appealed. And I had I sent the message around to them to appeal it so it could come to us. But they did not appeal because of believing that it didn't matter, appealing, it don't work, different reasons. And so these statistics are nothing in regards to looking at how we can provide support to a school that there's some issues with, because this does not tell us where the highest numbers of suspension is. I just wanted to be clear about that.
Yeah.
But that, Ricardo brings up a point, because by the time it gets to us, and that's my frustration, they've already, served the time, so to speak, and it is, it's over, so they're back in school by the time it gets to us. So that's my frustration. We've got to get better with that process.
So the issue with that is the board has 30 school days to review an appeal and provide the student and their family with a response. But sometimes families don't appeal immediately. So it also depends on how long the suspension is. If it's, let's say, 20 days, right, and they didn't turn it in until day 15, that's a lot of the times the reasons why the student may have returned back to school. So the shorter the suspension, they have to be really quick on it. And then also, depending on how many suspensions the board is, also about to review, can also determine how quickly that the one that we receive will be reviewed.
I will say that this board meets more than most boards to review suspensions. Most boards only meet monthly and have maybe 1 or 2. When I talk to other district clerks in other districts, I don't want to compare us to them, but this board does meet frequently to address suspension appeals. So because this is public, letting folks know, if you appeal, it's not because please don't think that there is no reason, there's no recourse. You can get your suspension overturned if it is unfair. The board does, if you can look at the data here, does really look at these cases and dive into the data to really understand what took place in the incident. But the board does get a lot of cases, and they come at, the other pieces of information that I want to look at is also the time of year that the board gets them, because we are normally slammed in November. We are slammed before the spring, before the breaks, and we're slammed again before the summer. And so if you are someone who's appealing and 10 other people have appealed this week, more than likely, it's going to take a while before a response is generated, because the board only meets so much, and that's a lot anyway. So that's it for this data. Thank you, Charisma. Thank you. All right. Okay, the next activity is the 22-23 board goal setting discussion, and I just want to clarify that this is not the space where the board will be setting the goals, but the board does have a few questions. There's packets for board members in front there, and with some questions. So there was an email that was sent around, and thanks again, Rahima, for doing the research. The board asked, the last time we met in a work session over board goals, the board asked for us to look into to have things facilitated, and we reached out to all of our partner agencies. Right now, I did want to make aware some of the limitations and some of the procedural things that must be considered while the board is trying to deliver this. At the current moment, we would be able, is everything okay? Okay. At the current moment, we would be able to receive assistance from NISBA. However, NISBA did say that they are unable to assist until perhaps mid to late September. And that is definitely something to be considered. I did hand out a pamphlet. What they would do is a tailored, facilitated program for us. The challenge with this is that NISBA has said that the board's goals are really district goals, and they really should be developed hand in hand with the superintendent and cabinet. They really should not be separate and apart, because one, board does governance, and the management and the understanding of developing metrics and those things come from the cabinet level. And so they would be willing to work with the board, but they need at least an interim to be established, and the cabinet to be a part of this that process. So that's one consideration. The second thing, the New York State, NYSED does not generally do these kinds of hands-on, so they did send us back out to our other agencies. The Council of Great City Schools right now is in the date-setting stage with us. So right now, I know that President Elliott and Jennifer Pyle have an upcoming conversation.
We actually had the conversation.
You did great. So because they're trying to bring Council of Great City Schools to talk, of course, that is time.
Can I just interject here?
Use the mic. Yeah.
It was probably up. Remember some kind of comment.
The green is on? Okay, there you go.
So Jennifer and I did have a conversation, but, you know, Callie, you and I had spoke with the Council of Great City Schools. We had spoken with A.J. Crabhill. And so at the time when we had that conversation, there was some concern about going out for an RFP in order to do this work. And Callie, you had also talked with some other NISBA and
Other groups.
Monroe County School Boards Association and what have you. And so it looks like that it is the Council of Great City Schools that is the only one that perhaps can do this kind of work for us. And
Or NYSED, or sorry,
NYSED.
NISBA, depending on if we have an interim.
Okay, when we have an interim.
Yes, when we have
So
an
I think the question becomes, in terms of us setting goals, you know, do we just want to have a general conversation here now about what those goals look like, or do we want to wait, or do we want to continue with the goals that we have currently and then wait? And I'm going to just open that up to see what folk would like. I'll start with you, Commissioner Malloy. What's your?
I think.
Yeah, it's on.
It is on, okay. I would prefer just to amend our current goals, kind of roll them over from last year, amend them if necessary. We already know what those are. We have a degree of familiarity with them. If we need to make changes, we can. And the administration's already familiar with those, so we wouldn't be adding anything new to their plates. But some members have said that they wanted to add different wording, perhaps things dealing with security, et cetera. So those are all conversations that we could have, but I'd prefer to roll over our goals from last year as much as possible.
Oh, he's definitely, okay. I was going to pass it down. That's all right.
Yeah, Commissioner Adams here. You know, when I first got on here at the board, we had a different communications person. And one of the things that communication person had asked for was a consultant for communication. And I was like, it really upset me that we had that was his job, and he wanted to get a consultant for that. And so eventually, that person is no longer here. We have a person in place for communications. I believe we need to not squander resources. We need to use that person. I was looking at the newspaper yesterday. There's like 2 or 3 different stories. One say he's the interim. Others say that he's the acting because they're getting bad information. And we're leaking. I honestly think that we need to rely on our communications person. We're paying her. We're paying that person, and that's who should be doing the communications, not me. They come to me all the time. Now, they don't even ask me. I walked in yesterday, they don't even ask me because they know they're not going to get anything from me. We have a person in place for a reason, because they are better at just getting our message out. We're not the best at that. We aren't. None of us. Not me. Not even the president. They started with the president doing that before. Van loved that, and maybe he was good at it. Maybe he was. I don't know. But I know we have a communication person. Just like a teacher. We have teachers in these buildings. I don't want nobody else teaching the kids but the teacher. So I just have to say, the board, we're squandering resources if we don't do it that way. So that's my concern with us squandering resources.
Okay, so are you relating that in terms of considering having a consultant to help us to develop goals?
Absolutely not.
Oh, okay.
No. Yeah, no. So I thought you was talking about the consultant for communication.
No.
So can I have to just say this, because I know I was standing here like, what is Ricardo talking about? And I do know what you mean with the consultant for communication. But I was like, we're talking about the board goals.
So, okay, so
We love you, Ricardo.
thank you. Absolutely. No doubt.
I'm just gonna, since I got the mic, I just want to add, I actually would support. So here's the thing, I would like to say this on record too. We didn't meet the goals. So for me to think about like we're about to start or embark on a whole new set of goals, we didn't even meet the goals we set last year, and also they were too generally written, and they need to be more specific. So I would support keeping the goals and honing in on them to make them more actually accessible and doable, and like we talked about SMARTY goals, equitable and all the stuff, achievable. So that's one. I would keep it as is, but then just hone in on those because they weren't met. We literally did an evaluation and said goals were not met. So that's just my 2 cents. In terms of, I think what you're also asking, so personally, I would like to just leave them to roll over and then still have NISBA come in and do.
So I want to clarify, if NISBA does come in, they would be starting from scratch. They have said, we understand you have goals, but the goals that you put together were, put together by yourselves. They would really like to have you work with the interim and the cabinet to come up with, and maybe you come back up to the 3, but really to figure out the metrics and how that all rolls up to independently, not to just roll over. They're not going to do the rollover process with you. If you want to do the rollover process, I think you would have to do that independently.
I'm confused about that, yeah, because like if we're having rollover, we're saying, yes, we want to roll over and then hone in on them and have metrics. Why wouldn't they do that? We're paying them to do that.
I'm just the messenger.
Okay, well then that's a no for NISBA then, because I would like us to keep our goals but hone in on them versus starting on a whole new, we don't even know what the next year is going to look like. We have an acting right now, well hopefully will then transition into an interim. But that doesn't make any sense, so.
Well, right, and they won't do it unless there's an interim, so, yeah.
Kalia, did NISBA have an opportunity to review our current goals? Did you mention that?
So they did not review our current goals. We did mention to them that we do have current goals. They would say that they'd be starting over the process.
I was kind of curious if they had reviewed them and maybe.
No, they're not making an assumption based on the fact that they've looked at them and said, no, these are terrible.
Right.
We got to start over. No, they said they normally start from scratch with a school district, and so that's what they would be.
And I can understand that process because those type of things are a process when you're looking at SMART goals and things of that nature. So I'm kind of at a at a mid-road, if you will. But I'm thinking for continuity, if that's what we need, more so stability, I guess. It's a lot going on. And so I do think the goals will need to be modified on some level, streamlined, and see where we can put more muscle into them. So I guess I would support the rolling over at this time. I would ask my fellow board member commissioners, when we think about this past school year and the board goals that were determined for this year, were there things that we said, wow, this should have been a goal?
You want to respond to what she said?
I think one of the issues is that it wasn't ever clear to me, at least as a board member, how our goals aligned with what administration was coming up with to meet those goals. So the strategic plan, is that what? That was never really clearly aligned, in my opinion. And I think that caused a great deal of confusion because what they came up with was a bit different than what we had asked them to do. And then that communication never took place. So hopefully that will take place this year.
So with that said, when we consider where we are, the state of our district, the direction we are hoping to go in, are we comfortable with if those goals do get lined up and do flow the way they should ideally flow, are these the goals? Because we're stuck with them if we stick with them.
So, yeah, so I think that part of that, as we talked with A.J. Crabhill from the Council of Great City Schools, they did not, for a couple of things. One is they did not really tie the children to students. We can assume that, all of what we're doing was to children, but it did not specify that. And secondly, there were no metrics. And what he, when we had the conversation with him is that, we go out to schools and we visit the schools, and oftentimes what we do, at least what I do, is, I'm talking to the principal, I'm going into classrooms, but what he's suggesting is that, as we go into the schools, we need to have the metrics to find out from them where are we with those metrics, and that's not what our goals. That's not how our goals look. So, just want to put it on the table.
So I guess my question is now, going around the table, when will the interim title be given? Is that Monday? Is it? Not until you settle the contract? Gotcha. All right, and so that really answers my other question relative to NISBA, that I would welcome that. If they haven't met the goals this year, then going ahead, I would like some other advice on, doing things better or a different way or attainable goals, right? So them giving us an example of that and that being our boilerplate, I would look forward to that. And third, again, I said it before, I'd love to have discussion, relative to it, minus the police on school safety and creating a safe environment. But I'd like to see that as a goal, because unless we make our schools safe, it's not conducive to learning in each classroom. So that's just my opinion, and anyone else is welcome and to have dialogue.
Okay, just one thing for you to frame your thinking on. Our strategic plan ends in 2023. We're going to start to have that conversation sooner than later about planning for moving forward, right? Had that conversation with State Ed today a little bit as well. Establishing solid board goals will help drive what also the strategic plan is going to do for us as a district. So if there wants to be alignment, if you want there to be alignment, I would look at your board goals as we begin to do our strategic planning. So I think those things need to be thought about as you make some decisions.
I just would add, though, there's nothing that stops us from carrying these over, honing in on them, having some metrics, because I would agree with Mr. Crabhill that there were no metrics. I don't want to just say, I don't want to just edit and just add to focus on students, and then that doesn't mean anything. Like, I don't want to do that. but I certainly would be open to editing, having some metrics for this year. However, to your point, Carmine, I will say this again on the record, that is not our strategic plan. That was a plan that came from the Denver School District. It is not actually even made or catered to the Rochester City School District. So it's null and void in my opinion. However, there's nothing that stops us from saying that we edit these goals, we do that ourselves, we figure out what the metrics are going to be, and that we then align ourselves with NYSBA to do goal setting with an interim as we move forward and start that process earlier next year rather than later. So come January, February, we can start talking about the 23 goals so that we have new goals for the following school year with a new strategic plan and a more comprehensive way, and give us 6-7 months to really solidify that versus doing it at the end of the year and we only have like a month or 2 months to get it done. And I would just add that piece, that there's nothing that stops this board from saying no to NYSBA right now, but yes to NYSBA come January, February with the administration to figure out what the following school year goals will look like with a new strategic plan that is based out of Rochester's actual needs and not Denver.
So, for clarification, so if you tweak your goals now and add metrics, that's one bucket. And then you have a strategic plan that has metrics. How do you marry the metrics in the strategic plan with the metrics you have in your, for your goals? That should be almost one and the same. And plus, I mean this in a respectful way. If you didn't meet your metrics for the first 2 years of the plan, it seems highly likely you won't meet the metric for the third year of the plan. So wouldn't it be wise to look at those metrics for the purpose of, do they need to be adjusted? I don't know, or at least adjusted to match your goals? To, you know, kind of do two things.
You're talking about
at
for the
same-
strategic plan, the goals, that the
Right.
metrics in the strategic plan.
Right,
Not being met.
because right now, it sounds like there's two parallel sets of metrics.
It's not even our plan, though.
Right, no, and that's why I'm saying, is this an opportunity to use the metrics in the strategic plan to help you do what you want to do for your goals by adding metrics to your goals, and then really taking a good hard look at your metrics in your strategic plan, even though it's the last year, for that same reason. You're off the mark at this point. Maybe it's time to just look at both at the same time and make them one.
But I'm thinking we're going to have to develop a new strategic plan.
Well, that too,
Right,
but.
so that's where I was going, is that a new strategic plan's coming,
Yeah.
right? And we have to, right. But don't you think having board goals that will guide a little bit of where we will go with the strategic plan will also help move the strategic plan in the direction we need to be? So I think we may be saying the
I
same thing.
think we're saying the same
Okay.
thing. I'm saying, if you're gonna adjust your goals to have more metrics, because you've gotten advice that you need metrics, why not look to your strategic plan to get the metrics to add to your goals?
Because this strategic plan doesn't meet what the board wants, and I'm trying to
Okay.
say, if we're going to create.
So it's totally not salvageable.
So
There's
what-
no metrics in
So
there.
what I'm saying is, if we're going to create a strategic plan, my question is this, is what strategic plan,
I'm just asking.
what do you want to guide the strategic plan? Do you want the board goals to describe the strategic plan?
Yes.
Should it be done, so if that's the case, if the strategic plan process is going to be 23 new strategic plan in place, moving forward
Right.
for 5 years,
Right.
should the board goals be pushing the strategic plan in that direction, or do you want the strategic plan created first?
We're saying the same thing. All I'm asking is, from from September 1st, next week, to June, what you're following, what are your metrics? What are you doing?
So I want to give a little brief time check, only because this is, there are a few things that I do want to get us to align to. What's your timeline? When do you guys want to have some goals in place? I think that it sounds like, just from the tables, that considering a rollover for right now, reassessing in January, alongside the strategic plan process, and then bringing in, you know, whoever facilitator at that point to help with the goals process moving forward. And so you'll have something kind of in the transition, but then have something more formal, more guided, more established, more effective start in January. But to look at the goals that we currently have now, whatever way we can kind of edit them to make them useful for the year, for the current year, and
Yeah.
then really looking at, does that sound like a decent process?
So-
Okay, so yeah.
So we're talking
why-
the Three Horizons, that's a Wade Norwood
Yeah.
thing, you know, the Three Horizons. So what we're gonna do in the meantime
Yeah,
is
and
we work towards that
this is the
future
meantime
state.
until we can get to.
And so, yes, and so the conversation that just happened, that's what I'm hearing, that we collectively want to roll them over, make some modifications. To Dr. Jello's point, some of those modifications will include being a little more minute so that we are in a position to meet some of those goals
Right.
as we transition. But to Dr. Peluso's point as well, we would also be making modifications that have language that allow for the strategic plan development moving forward. So we would do all of those things. Is that what I'm?
Yes.
Am I thinking
that's
right?
what I
Okay.
think we're all hearing. So that aside, I put some deadlines here. There are a few things here within that right now phase. We have ASAP, which the next special meeting, because we have a work session coming up next week. That's already pre-assigned to talking about the next leadership process.
Yeah.
Sorry. But the next special meeting, that's an opportunity to really firm up. That's September 13th. School would have started already, but not too far afterwards. It is after the deadline that is in the academic plan, but I think not too far off. Otherwise, from that, you can call an emergency special meeting or something like that before school opens. Those are the two options.
I thought we had September 1st as a date to discuss our goals.
No, you have that for talking about the superintendent search process. That's what you.
So we don't have a date assigned yet for a work session for board goals.
No, it was that, but we had to switch. Yeah.
President Elliott, I would recommend that we probably just meet in groups of 3, 3, and 2 to do the editing, and then just, we could probably knock it out at a work session if we have a few meetings beforehand, and rotate people. So it's not the same 3, 3, and 2, we just rotate everybody out. And then come together to a work session with the edited language. So if we meet the first 3, 3, and 2, then we'll rotate again, 3, 3, 2. 3, 2, 2, 3, 2, 2. I keep saying 3, 3, 2. I'm giving us extra board members that we don't have.
3, 2, 2.
But I just want to add, though, like the question around the strategic plan and board goals. And I will tell you, with school board fellows, like one of the, I think, in my opinion, one of the best strategic plan strategies that a school board has done for me was out of New Orleans. And even how it like presents, and very easy for anybody in the community to pick it up, understand like this is what the board or the district is working on this year, this is how they're going to implement it, this is how they're going to measure it, this is how they're going to let the community know. But that included lots of community input, so it wasn't just an internal process for them. They did a lot of community like roundtables and workshops and said these are some of the strategies or ideas we have, and collected that input and then made that input public as well. And then also showed why they accepted some of the recommendations from the community and why they didn't. This didn't work because this is not where we're at right now, and this is the direction that we want to go in. And I say that to say, it almost reminds me of like which came first, the chicken or the egg, and that's what you're asking, like shouldn't the board goals drive the strategic plan? And I would say that the strategic plan should be a collective community, internal, external partnership, and that should then help drive the goals based on the strategic plan. So I would actually say the strategic plan and process should come first to help drive what the goals will then be for that year to meet year 1 of the strategic plan. And the metrics should all be tied. So whatever is in, and that's why we have this disconnect. It's not our strategic plan. It was a strategic plan that was brought to us. And then if you Google it, you'll find out that it's someone else's school districts. And that's great and dandy to look at different frameworks, right? Because we all do look at different school districts and their frameworks. Does that equate to being enough for this particular school district, I would say no, it didn't. Unfortunately, it didn't. And we didn't help ourselves with goals that we didn't create metrics for. So we have to own that too as a board. And I'll own it, right? We were like, oh, this is the process, we did it last year. So I would say moving forward, but I would also just add that we don't have to wait till June, April, May to have board goal discussions for September, that if we started this process in January, February, that we could potentially have not only the strategic plan, but board goals by the end of July, the latest, and start off in August, educating both the school community and the community at large, so that September 1st, this is how we know we're rolling.
All right. With that said, that means that we'll collectively look at time. We don't have as much time as we think we do. We are right here. Next week, Monday is the 30th and 31st. The 30th, you have an FMP work session. And then on the 1st, you have a work session regarding superintendent search process. And then on Tuesday, the 6th, you have a CIGR and policy meeting. And so
my position is
yeah.
to make this a priority. We need to come
Yeah.
together ASAP and get this going. If our, sorry, I'm not talking to Mike, but if our goals are the guiding factor for this district
Yeah.
and where we are trying to go, and we want to stabilize or whatever it is we're doing, we need to make that a priority. So
Okay.
ASAP is where I am with it.
ASAP, the next time the board meets is Monday, and so whatever, Carmine, can you tell me about more about Monday? Or can you say more about
Sure,
Monday?
I'm going to say more. Yeah, so you said Tuesday was the FMP, Monday's the FMP, Tuesday's an open meeting day.
Tuesday's open, yeah.
Tuesday's open, but Monday's FMP, we will look at the core model, over what was developed for the core model over the last few weeks. So that's essentially what is a standard K-6, standard 7-8, standard 9-12 building have into it, and then provide you guys with some time to provide us feedback on, hey, we would like to see this, we would like to see that. So that would be an opportunity for some feedback gathering, and then also kind of just outline some other timeline dates that are coming up. You'll receive that presentation either today or tomorrow. Just working that.
The other thing
that'll
I'd
be
like to
Monday.
add is that that meeting was slated for 1 hour. So if you want to utilize the time after that meeting, that gives you time. We did not schedule more than 1 hour for that presentation.
Can I just ask for clarity? You're talking about to discuss board goals?
Yeah,
So
it
let
would
me
be
just
after-
say this.
it would-
I would caution that we have public conversations without having some understanding and some consensus behind the scenes. We look really crazy sometimes when we're up there and we're all just throwing ideas at a wall and we haven't had some previous conversations about some things. And this is a previous conversation, right? I think we're on agreement that we're going to keep the goals and edit them. But I would like us to have meetings before that meeting so that we can start the editing behind the scenes in smaller groups and then come together. And again, I just want to add, I actually would not prefer that it was ran the way that it was ran last time with feedback just thrown up for that to me was a little bit all over the place and did not feel genuine or authentic, and it just felt like we're all professional adults in different fields and we couldn't get it together. I just don't want to be doing those types of conversations around something as important as goals in the public without some previous internal meetings in smaller groups with the board members.
So in the interest of time, why don't we look at, I know the first is to begin talking about the superintendent search process, perhaps going afterwards. What I'm trying to avoid is adding more meetings to the calendar without consulting with our communications team, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know what is happening. There might be a whole other meeting taking place on other dates, and I want to make sure that I check into that, and I would really not want to just
Can
throw
we
a meeting.
swap, Kalia?
Can
I'm
you swap?
wondering,
Yeah,
the
you can-
superintendent date is September 1st,
I can swap.
correct?
I can,
And
yeah.
versus board goals on the 13th. It would make sense to do our board goals prior to the start of the school year and our superintendent search discussion move
On the
that to the 13th, perhaps?
We can do that.
I mean, I don't want to speak
We
for the
haven't
board.
noticed
I'm
the
just
meeting
wondering.
yet. So we can use that instead, and in the meantime, we will do some swapped out 322s leading up to the meeting on the 1st. All right. We will move on, and the next person is Kathy, Deputy Black. Thank you very
Make sure
much.
you update the media, because y'all don't all put out September
Yeah,
1st as the day for
we
the
haven't noticed it
superintendent
yet.
search conversation,
Yeah.
and they already like texting. I'm like, it's out there.
Yeah, so we'll have to make that clarification to the media, and we'll change our calendar to say that the 1st will be for additional board goals discussion, and the special meeting on the 13th will come with the preliminary discussions regarding the superintendent search process.
So I'm hoping we can get to a point where we're going to be, we may have to have these meetings right now, but in the future that we're reducing these meetings tremendously, so.
Okay. All right. So, Kathy?
So I'm going to apologize for what you might feel like is an audible, because I had this as a working session with us having a conversation, and those questions are different when we are in the place where we have to have public conversations. So you might see me trying to pause to figure out how to adjust so that we don't violate any privacy or whatever the things are. All right, so, and having to stand at this microphone, oh my goodness. So 2 things in this time is we're gonna understand the importance of ELA and math EOY data from iReady and the impact of consistent assessment planning and why we have to use iReady K-8 really hardcore and understand what we're doing with it for the 22-23 school year. So by the time we're done, you will have seen a high level of the data overall from iReady, and we'll work through a couple of different reports and some aggregate information so that you really have a notion of understanding that when we come and talk to you all about why you have to use a program or why we have to attend to the instructional models or why people can't deviate or veer off and do their own thing, why it's going to be really important for 22-23. So that's the couching of the time. I think the clicks are going to be off, so I'm going to give you and I can't see. I'm going to give you this report. I'll give you this report. They're all the same. So they're told you have 2 sheets. And you've seen these red, yellow, green bars a number of times. And so I want to kind of orientate you to what you see typically so that when we see them over the course of time over the year, you know, when we present, you know exactly what you're looking at. So that all the data we're going to see is all the data that Shani shared with the board in aggregate in the last ESA meeting. The thing I'm going to say we're going to upgrade is that Shani had different colors when she did it last time. We're going back to the red, the yellow, the green in the bars. So as you all build capacity, we build capacity to kind of talk about what's here. We're going to always see the same colors so that they always mean the same thing.
So we got different numbers on here.
Yeah, so don't pay attention to the numbers. It's just literally the orientation of the report. So anytime you see an iReady report, right, anytime you see an iReady presentation from us, it's going to look with these colors. The colors are really important. The green with the bars represents students who are at or above grade level, which means that I'm in 4th grade. When I took the iReady diagnostic, I am at 4th grade level or higher than 4th grade. The green bar that has no color in it, right, and yours is not as good because it's copies, but the green bar that has no color in it represents early on grade level. Early on grade level. So the one with the black lines, green, says I am solidly in 4th grade, I solidly know 4th grade work, or I might be really good at 5th grade work. And I'll use 4th grade as kind of our centering. If I am just green, that means I am 4th grade and like I'm just getting to 4th grade, like I'm kind of okay, but I'm not all the way there yet. If you see yellow, yellow is 1 grade below. So now that same 4th grade baby is performing kind of like a 3rd grader. If you see red, that same 4th grade is now kind of like a 2nd grader. If you see red with colors, that same fourth grade baby is kind of around the first grade or below, so 3 or more. So I want to just hip you to the colors so that as we go through, you have an understanding of what the colors are telling you about the achievement overall. Let me stop there and ask any questions. Here.
So yellow, red, and red with lines is not meeting standards?
Yes.
Thank you.
Everybody good with that?
It's good with that, but
You got to use the microphone, I
it's
think.
difficult to remember it, to be honest. Is it?
So,
I'm sorry. Thank you. Are they documented there, what each one means, so in case we forget?
so right under, you'll see the legend. Right? Unfortunately, when you flatten the PDFs, the black that's supposed to be gray comes out lighter gray. And so that's what you have right there. So it's much easier. I'll put up and I'll go in and out. Maybe I'll put this same thing up so you can see it. You don't understand how my eyes are over there. Like, look. But I wanted to, so this is literally just an understanding of what the colors mean, because it's going to be very important to all of the other things that get up here. So I want to make sure people feel good about when you see red with the black lines, when you see red, when you see yellow, when you see green with the green lines, the black lines. We're good? All right.
So, just one question, Kathy. So why, what? Alert. So why isn't there any bars in the yellow area? Why is that just straight yellow
Because it's just highlighting that you are,
on grade level?
approaching grade level. Like
Oh,
you're
approaching
one grade
grade
level
level.
behind. So
And I
it's
got
like
that.
one grade level. So at that point it becomes one grade level whole number, 2 grade levels whole number, 3 grade levels whole number or more.
So this is like the state assessments, the 4, 1, 2, 3, 4.
We can make some correlations. Yeah, we'll be able.
These results are from the last time?
Yes.
The
So
most recent time that they took?
So I'll get to the actual what the results are. But
No,
yes.
I'm just saying, are you presenting from the most recent
Yes.
administration?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm going to get to what the actual results are, but I wanted to have you make sure that you understood what the colors mean. Good?
So I'm just really concerned when you show me that. You can show me on there where we say, oh, there's a problem, and we need to do something. Way before the red.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yellow.
Yes, so let me jump in, and then maybe, so why is this important, and why is it important for you all to really understand what you're looking at, so that when we get feedback and we give suggestions, like Commissioner Adams is saying around, how do we say, it's a problem, and Dr. Black says, hey, we must use this thing, and then someone calls you and goes, I don't want to use the thing, then you understand why Dr. Black said, use the thing. Right, so that, and I know I'm saying a lot of things, but just understand the connections there. So, ability to compare like measures. So right now, when we've been a year in, the ability to look at all of our students across the district, K-8, with the same measure is really huge. For us, it then allows us to then figure out what kind of professional development, what kind of supports, what kind of materials do we need to buy as a district, what does this school need, what does this classroom need. Prior to this year, we didn't have a way, holistically, there were different pockets of things, but we didn't have a way to say, what do we know about all of our students against each other in the district? So this is what iReady does for us. It also allows us to make aligned curricular decisions. So we had the notion of having to update our books and our materials. This helps us get a better sense of where we need to update and why. And then the consistent materials. So iReady, the tool, has a bank of instructional materials, things teachers can use, that then allow us to track against certain standards. And there's all kinds of notions of, in ELA, there are standards for each grade level, for each skill kid has to learn. In math, there are standards for each content area. iReady will allow us to drill down to the standard and the student and figure out how we support and intervene. So that's why iReady is a thing this year. That's why iReady was a thing last year that everybody has to do, and everybody has to do to fidelity. All right, so I'm going to give you a bunch of information. And this is where I want to walk, but I have to stay right here.
Can I just go back, Kathy, to that screen?
The why?
With regard to, yes, the why, the use of consistent materials. I think that there probably has already been some resistance to that, I would imagine. And so how do you respond to the fact that we should use consistent material? But I would also argue that we need diversity in our materials.
I do think that diversity in materials is important after there's some earned autonomy. Like, demonstrate that you are able to use what we offer you that we know is high quality and we know is standards aligned first, and then go. And so so I'll go, and I think, like, I know there's one thing that we've had a lot of conversations about, right? Around that I've used this thing for a really long time, it's good. Then the retort for you all would be, where is the utility and the good in this and the data we have available?
Not even so much that, Kathy, as much as it is the diversity in our students. So if we're talking about, let's just say, bilingual students,
Yeah.
you know, and so, and I'm not talking about necessarily, you know, just having the interpretation of the language,
Right.
but an interpretation of culture and that kind of thing. I mean, so is there that kind of, you use the term consistent, I guess I would use the term equity and equitable, in the sense of, you know, I mean, you would put, you know, a book like, let's say, what am I thinking of?
All the things, right? I said all the things. So
Yeah, in every, you know, because it may not work, so how do you respond to that?
So there is, I think, without getting over, there is a diversity in materials that is being offered to students that are supposed to be more aligned to, and I say supposed to be because I think we have work to do here, more culturally responsive, shows our students in the materials in the way they're supposed to be represented, right? Not just being there for picture or value. And then there's the alignment to the standards. And so when we think about moving the achievement, what is really important is, are the materials or the things that we're asking kids to know and do aligned to the standards, and are they culturally responsive? And I think we're working on that, but there's a lot of work to be done. Every student shouldn't get every book for everything. That is not in service of the standards. So I'm about to throw a lot of numbers your way. So when I start clicking, you'll understand the importance of the colors, and then you'll understand the importance of the message that we have to then lean on. But the color understanding is really important because visuals help. So we're going to get 2 buckets of information, one in math, one in ELA. Remember that iReady is K-8. So kindergarten through 8th grade, you have iReady data. This first bucket of information is around math. We took iReady this year twice, one in winter and one at the end of the year. When we take iReady in this upcoming year, you'll take it 3 times. Beginning of the year, the middle of the year, and the end of the year. So this data is based on 2 diagnostics. Typically there are 3. This data is based on 2. In the winter diagnostic, we had 12,432 students take the assessment or take the diagnostic. So then the one in the winter, that many students took it. In the spring, we had 12,905 students take the assessment. Okay? So it's an important number. Of the 12,905 students that took the assessment, 11,732 of them made growth. How much growth? Wide variety. Did students grow? Yes. And then 10,454 students engaged in the personalized instruction. So when I talk about the information data, it's about the assessments. The part about drilling down, the personalized instruction, is what kids actually did every day using iReady. So if you remember when we talked about the 85% in the sweet spot, that's about that personalized instruction. So here's some information. There are 4 bars, and I'm sorry, I need to come this way, because my eyes want to look this way. There are 4 bars. On the far left is a national norm from 1819. So of all the kids across the nation that took iReady in spring 1819, that's how they fared. The bar second is all the kids across the nation that took iReady in spring 21-22. So the same time our babies took it, this is the data. So that second bar. The third bar that says CGCS represents the students who are in the districts that participate in the Council of Great City Schools. That's who we use to come in and help us. That third bar is all those students in the districts and Council of Great City Schools. That fourth bar is our Rochester students. So again, pay attention to the colors.
For the spring, the 21,
For the
22.
spring.
And was this for, I'm sorry, this was math, okay. Thank
So
you.
this is math.
6% of our only 6% of our students are at or above grade level.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that means 6% of our 12,905 students in the area of math in grades K through 12 are performing on grade level.
I thought it was K through 8.
Oh, I just said, you're right, K through 8 are performing on grade level.
K through 8, and then it's what, 13?
This is K through 8 math, 12,905 students. 6% are performing solidly on grade level after a full year of instruction. Okay? This is why the colors become really important. 7% is on grade level. So if you think about grade level being the beginning of a span of a year, 13% of our students in grades K through 8, as indicated by this measure, are performing on or above grade level. Now pay attention. Go, yes,
Quick
ma'am.
question, just, you had said that of the 12,009,
I don't know whether the mic went. Oh, Kathy took it. Okay, Kathy, because I got a question too, but I wanted.
so of the 11,000 students of the 12,900 that showed growth, do we also have data that can show us that growth? Because, okay, that's what's coming. Because, I'm looking at that total 13%, which might be misleading in a way, because it doesn't show, like, you might have kids who are in that 35% group who are a grade level below, but what if during the course of the year they were at that bright red down at the bottom, but then they gained 2 years? That's a major achievement. So, okay.
Yeah, see, now what I've been saying, if I was in church, come on now, come on.
I just want to add though, so just calculating real quick, but it doesn't look good for the council either. I mean, they have like 58% total students below grade level by at least 1 grade and failing down, and we have 86%. So I did the calculation, and there's no other way to cut it. 86% of our kids are not meeting grade level or below, and a big chunk of that is still even worse. It doesn't look good for them, but we certainly, it doesn't look good for us either.
So I will acknowledge that the data nationwide is subpar. But I think the comparison data, right, is really important for us to understand as we ground the decisions around how we move instruction.
What's that grade, what is in the yellow for Council of Great City Schools? I can't read that number.
I know,
Is
we're
that
up there,
58?
it's like 30,
34%.
34.
All right, so this is math, right? Comparison, how we compare. So same thing, orientation to the bars, right? Your first 2 bars on the left is national data. Your third bar, Council of Great City Schools data. Your fourth bar, RCSD data. So, and now this is by grade level in Rochester. And I want you to make some noticing about what you see. Not comparison from us to somebody else. Suspend that for a moment. What do you see in terms of kids as they go up in grade level?
67, 65.
They're performing worse than any other school district.
No, it goes down.
So suspend the first 3 bars.
look at our last bar in K1 and 2. What do you notice about the colors?
They go up as they move into the grades.
Okay.
In other words, they're getting worse.
Right, more and more of our students are performing below grade level.
So as the students in a higher grade, right, and again, this is a one-year measure, so don't compare it to any previous year, this is 1 year. As our students get in higher grades, we have more students who are
Failing.
below grade level.
Well, failing. I don't want to say, yeah, I'm with you, Dr. Jallo. I don't want to say that they're failing, because if I look at this, even this, what you gave us, and I go up to 6th grade, 8th grade is almost 100% in red.
But
Yeah, why are we doing grade promotion?
Here's the thing, there's power in language. And if we have to hold the bar about how we speak about the power and the wonder that our kids have access to, something is different when you say we're failing versus we're not there yet. And we're not there yet.
Or say that we're failing our children. We are failing our children.
No, but what you're saying, the encouraging words that need to be said.
We got to, so, and this is
Yeah,
where
yeah,
I'll
'cause this is
step
what
out
we
of
gotta
this
do.
for a moment. You
Yeah.
know, we just spent 2 days with school leaders.
Yeah.
Leaders across the district. And they saw this data too. But the power of saying we're not there yet and then speaking life into what we need to do is very different than saying we're failing. We are not doing best by our kids. And we have a lot to do differently. But, and I'll give the example that Rita Pearson gives in her speech about a student is 1 out of 17, and you can either give that student an F and say you're 1 out of 17, and say, well, at least you got 1. You have a lot more room to grow, right? Paraphrasing, not direct. And we have to start saying, because everybody else is telling us we're failing. We have to start saying, we have a lot of work to do. But I'm like, the orientation, I'm going to go back into this, the orientation of the bars is really important, which is why I spent time there. So, grades K, 1, 2. Carmine, I see you.
So I just, the numbers, no matter which way you cut them, are good or not good, but for math, are the 8th graders that are advanced in taking integrated algebra involved in those numbers? Because they're not in our state assessment data, right? You know, so so are they are they participating in iReady?
Yes.
Yes, okay, so that's even in our advanced 8th grade students.
So let me go back, and I'm sorry, let me just say that I've seen this data several times, and so my reaction to this data feels very even, because I had my probably outright temper tantrum about it very early on. Like, not even.
Seen it multiple times over.
Not even, it wasn't even a cute temper tantrum, it was really not cute. But here's the data, again, 3, 4, and 5 for math. Make the noticings. So now I'm going to invite you to look at where we are in comparison to other places. And then I'm going to do the same thing for 6, 7, and 8. Your 8th grade children that we just sent to high school, this is their data.
I just want to note here, though, as this is about to come up from that audit, that then that translates us into graduating kids with like a 0.5 GPA, including East. And I just want to say that because y'all be boosting East like East got the magic sauce, and they're graduating kids with piss poor GPAs. And I'm going to use President Elliott's word of piss poor, because all of this it correlates.
First, acknowledge that if in the spirit of piss poor language, or using the language of piss poor, the district is performing. This is across the district, so that's every school affiliated with this district. That is us, and that's our reality. And I truly understand the power in language and hope, and that is the language we need to be mindful of when we're speaking to our students. But the harsh reality, when we have that thumb pointing back at us, need to be not that our students are failing, because there is hope. We can get them there. We are failing our students, and for me, I have to have that hard language with myself, because I don't want to alter the reality. I do have faith that our children can make it. I have faith that our district can get there, but until we have a really sound, sober reality check that we're focusing on the wrong things, this is what we're going to see. And this is not right now, and this is not post-COVID. This is generational. We're talking about grandparents who are graduating with this same piece. And to Vice President LeBron's point, those GPAs, they were back when that's 20 plus something years ago. GPAs were like that. So, okay, I'm preaching now. Did someone else want this mic?
So you'll get this information in a hard form, but again, this is the math data. This is where we are. This is how we have to now think about how we make decisions that drive instruction that changes this. So here's a connection to the work. This data is our key. So look at the 8th grade bar, and it's not great to look at, but it's how we then understand the conversations we're having about high school redesign, the conversations we're having about freshman academy, the conversations we're having about doing something different. This is why. Because we just sent a collection, 86% of our students who are in 8th grade are performing at 3 grade levels or more below grade level. And I know that, I already know where you're gonna go, so.
No, you don't know where I'm gonna go? Wait a
I
minute.
know one of the key messages that you shared with me.
What am I gonna say?
We just should be looking at 8th grade, this is trajectory-wise, but go ahead.
Right, so that, as we sit here end of August, I want to know what you and administration are going to do, or you want the board to do, to support you, to make sure that those 8th graders have a fighting chance when they get to 9th grade. Those 9th graders are going to be the ones in your appeals, your suspensions, your cutting, your chronic absenteeism, because when they walk through the door and that math teacher starts to try and teach them algebra, they're going to flip out. Because the last time they really learned some math was back in 4th grade or 5th grade. And so that's what I want to get to the part where we start talking that kind of talk. Those levels.
Can you go back one slide real quick, just really quickly, because I just want to see the spike. Yeah.
So when we start to talk about how, and this is way in the things, right? There are touch points where you can see where the learning changes, right? Mm-hmm. There are gaps where from 3 to 4 in ELA, the learning changes. In grade 4, the types of numbers that students use change. So in grade 3, you're all whole numbers. And this is really easy. You're all whole numbers. You're straight adding, like the straight math.
There's a correlation to literacy scores.
Same thing.
Because
4th
math
grade,
is literacy.
you now get fractions, right? And you start to have to understand numbers not as a whole, but as parts. And you build on that, and then you get here, and then you don't have, and then you can't do, right? And so, and I know there are a lot of reflections, so I want to kind of switch. So this is our math data. And again, you'll get all of this. This is public content. This is not something hidden. This is public content. Yes, Commissioner Malloy.
Just a quick question. So where can we find access then for school by school of this IRA data? Because there must be some schools that are doing things a little better than others, right? Or just reaching students maybe in a different way. And what are those schools? Where are they doing it right? And then how do we make sure that other kids have access to that? But also taking it a step further and looking to see which teachers within their classrooms are able to get kids to a higher level, yep. Right? And then if need be in a given school, have kids working with those individuals, either with a teacher on special assignment or, if there's certain concepts that are being taught really well by certain teachers, and no one's great at everything as a teacher, but if you have one individual who's really good at a certain concept in math, learning to have those students work on that concept with that particular teacher, and then having other teachers work on other concepts. So just a thought.
Yes. So I was holding up the paper. So the system does allow us to drill from the district all the way down to which kid at which time and how long. So we have that. What I also have in handout form is by school, the reading bar. So like there's 3 or 4 different reports I'm going to offer you so that when you see it, you understand. So ELA, same cadence, right? The number of students that took it in the winter the number of students that took it in the spring, the number of students that made growth. And because I got a time check, I'm going to breeze through this. Similar trend, right? Because I'm going to get to the part about growth that Commissioner Malloy brought up earlier, about typical growth versus stretch growth, and like what we need to do to then get to Dr. Jallo's point about what we need to do collectively. Patterson, I see you.
Oh, wait, go ahead.
Okay. So, same thing, same broken down. First bar, second bar, national data. Third bar, council data. Fourth bar, Rochester data by grade level. Now, you say, well, in kindergarten, what's happening there? When you first start to learn to read, there's foundational skills that kids master. You learn your sounds, you learn your rhymes, you learn how to put words together. All of those things happen. And so in kindergarten, it makes sense that many of the kids are more yellow and green than red because that's their first introduction to it, and so many of them are getting it, right? It's kind of what happens. So these are our first-time kindergartners. That tells you that many of them learn many of the things at the end of the year. Makes sense. First grade, second grade, now your data starts to change. And this is aggregate data. 3, 4, 5. And then 6, 7, 8. This is where we are. We have a lot of room to grow. Here's what's encouraging. There's a notion in iReady around growth measures. So remember I said 11,000 of the 12,000 kids, and I know I'm rounding numbers, made growth. In the system, in the work, you're able to see how kids have grown. And there's typical growth and stretch growth. And what we want to see, because we have so many students who are not there yet, we want to see a lot of students making their stretch growth. Because if you have 2 years of making your stretch growth, the likelihood of you closing the gap and getting on grade level is almost insurmountable. Kids who make typical growth, well, if you grow typically every year and you're 3 years below, you never close the gap. Okay? And so we want to see kids, and we'll have more reports, right? But you want to see kids that are making their stretch growth, not just growing. So here's our growth data. This is our data. So this says in grade K, 21% of kids that took the assessment in kindergarten made their typical growth. And 9% of kids in kindergarten made their stretch growth. So what does that mean if you go back? I'm going to go back, and I'm sorry. If my 9% of babies in kindergarten make their stretch growth 2 years in a row, it's more likely they're going to be great. But my 21% of kindergartners, if they keep at that same pace, they won't close the gap. So then look at the difference. Is what grade levels made the typical growth, which means they did exactly what they were supposed to do, versus the kids who were able to make more of. Now here's what's encouraging, because I can't leave it all back. What's encouraging is that we only had 2 interactions with the assessment. So this year, right, we got a full year with the tool, a full year of use, everybody knowing the bar, everybody meeting the bar. It's very likely that we will have a lot more kids make their typical growth, and even more kids make their stretch growth, because they will have more time to engage. Now I'll talk questions.
So what percentage would you say was perhaps, I'm sorry, did I? Okay.
So my question was,
Attention all RMSC Museum and Science Center visitors. The time is now 4:45 p.m. We'd like to inform you that the museum, as well as the museum's gift shop, will be closing in 15 shop will be closing in just 15 minutes.
Okay, so I'm more interested in solutions, and you started to mention some. You mentioned the Freshman Academy, so if you could reiterate, tell me a little bit about that, and any other solutions that you're thinking of to increase those numbers.
So, Freshman Academy, there are a lot of ways by which we are connected to the data. Very high level, it's going to sound very cliche, but if you talk to any leaders, know that's the last days. The linchpin to this is providing access and consistent engagement with grade level material with the appropriate scaffold, which means give the kids the work at their standard and help them understand and reach the standard. That is literally the difference between typical growth and straight growth. It's literally tier one, so that every kid gets access to in every classroom every day at grade level. That is the number one thing that we've shared in lots of places. Beyond that is having a really good understanding of what skills students are missing that is preventing them from engaging with grade level content. So that's your intervention, that's your small group, that's your additional time, that's your high volume tutoring, all the things that we're engaging in now. So that's the short version of the short answer to that question. But there's a lot of things we can do differently. Namely, the first one is actually to generate.
To the Freshman Academy.
So at Freshman Academy, like transitional grade supports, right now with freshmen is making sure that they have access to grade level. And right now we're in the process of shifting and building Freshman Academy. So there's increased time. There's some shifting in schedules that's happening, but it's not in every building. It's not comprehensive. Right, the yellow on our academic system.
So my question was, how much of this data, though, because this is relatively new, right? We've had, what, a year and a half? Not even. So much of this data was probably affected by unfinished learning from COVID. I'd love to know.
There's a wide range of research that is demonstrating that COVID did not have the academic impacts in data that we're giving it credit for. And if I, respectfully, that COVID happened for the last 2 years.
Okay.
If I go to my 8th grade bar and look at the amount of children who are 3 years below grade level in 8th grade, that tells you that even if they learn nothing during COVID, which is not true, when they left us in March of that year at 6th grade, they were already a grade level behind.
But do we have it broken down for kids who were remote versus the hybrid? I mean, I think those learning models had an impact that we don't yet know or understand. So I'm guessing that we're going to see big differences in the type of data coming in on iReady. I'm not dissing the tool in any way. I'm just thinking that we're going to see a lot of growth over the next year by using this and kids catching up from maybe that unfinished learning and with all the other interventions we've already put into place.
I would anticipate that we would see a good amount of growth after a full year of usage, but I just want to drive home the point and so that we're really clear. That 75% of babies who are in 8th grade that we just sent out, they were below level before they got the COVID. And so I don't want anyone to feel like COVID was the reason why our data looks like this. It's not actually an accurate representation of where we are right now. And I don't want anyone to walk away with that, because that is a really important factor about how we will then hold the bar and encourage teachers to do the same, because COVID is not the excuse why our 8th grade data looks like this. And I just want to.
But there are other factors other than teachers that go into those numbers
So,
as well.
So I think there's a lot of factors that contribute to the achievement of our students. Teachers, materials, families, learning, all the things. And while I consider that, and I know that there's a notion to highlight, we all have a job to do in service of this data. And I'm not causing blame on anyone, right? We all are culpable in this system by which we have these children. This is our data. We have a lot of work to do with them.
So I want to address the teaching part. I appreciate and believe that you have to have grade level content. That's extremely. But as a former math teacher, if you didn't have good math instruction in grade 4 and grade 5, you are not going to excel in algebra, right? Algebra is built on the mathematics that you learned in 4th and 5th grade, right? If you didn't get it there, it's very hard to catch it in 9th grade, 8th grade. You can, but it's extremely, extremely difficult. My other point about the stretch goals, somehow you, I think, not you personally, have to connect with HR. Because if you want somebody to stretch, if you want to give them stretch goals that gets them 1, 2, 3 years up, that has to be a certain kind of teacher. You can't just throw them in any class with any teacher. There's a certain kind of teacher with certain kind of skills that have to be in front of that student to make them stretch 3 years worth of content. And until you all work side by side about which teachers are in front of which students, right? There's going to always be, like a hit or miss or luck of the draw. And that's real, now that you know the stretch data that is needed for each student.
And so, on that vein, one question I had is, are we using that same approach when we consider our special education students? Oftentimes we consider special education and feel like that's their bar, when the reality is we should be stretching them as well, in that, they can come out. I know someone who publicly talks about how they're director of a program here in Rochester and was diagnosed with an IEP, and literacy, they still struggle in certain areas, but they learned how to stretch, how to accommodate and work with those skills that they were, in need of, and they are doing just fine. And so I want to make sure that we have that thought process. And so, along with what Dr. Jalla was saying, I was thinking so what I'm hearing your message is the consistency and use of tool, the pedagogy and practice of the teachers, but most importantly, as far as that stretch, would be the expectation. Because if you don't expect, then you're not going to stretch. And now, to Commissioner Malloy's point, I do understand that this is a all-inclusive piece. When we talk about unity, this comes from the board, administration, parents, teachers, students, like everyone has to play their part. But when we talk specifically about the educator in the classroom, that's what I'm focused on right now. That's what I'm hearing. Consistency, pedagogy, practice, and expectation is what's needed. And then there's things that parents can do at home. Are we there?
I think there's a lot of alignment there. So just kind of one more kind of visual, and then we'll get to the question that Commissioner Patterson raised about what's the solution, what's next, what do I need to.
But let me just also interject here. We've got Dr. Black, who's trying to put these pieces in place throughout our campus. But we also have resistance, and she's being vilified because she's trying to do this work. She wants to make sure that our students are stretching and they're getting to grade level, but there has been this resistance, and we're talking about people not liking Dr. Black, and this is why, we believe that they have issues with her because she's trying to do that. And so when there are people who work in our district who have low expectations for Black and brown children and say that, well, no, they can't get to this level, how dare they do that to these children? And so this is what Dr. Black is doing, and we've seen some of the evidence now of this kind of work. We'll continue to see more, but when we're hearing that there are people who are critical of Dr. Black because she's trying to get them to do this work, that's an issue. That's a serious issue because our kids can do it. And we're worse than any of among the great cities, Council of Great City Schools, the nation. You got to do better.
You took the words right from my mouth. We're a district of schools and not a school district, right? And I think what Dr. Black is trying to do is create a baseline, right? And we're trying to do this, create a baseline of what is a standard that we should be seeing in every building. And we have schools that push back on this because they believe that what they're doing is the right way. Our results haven't shown that. Right, our results haven't shown that. So we have to be firm and stand behind our messaging and saying that what has been done isn't working. This is the direction we're going as a district, and we're not going to accept anyone going off of that, right? And I think we have to be unified in that message. That has to be clear, because if we get principals that throw kinks in this, or teachers throw kinks in this, we'll never be able to do what we need to do.
nope, this is not even gonna help. I want you to sit with this, right? This is the reading, and I'm gonna quit.
Can I just say one thing, and I'm so sorry. I just want to make it clear that I'm not demonizing Dr. Black in any way when I raise any type of objection. I'd like to highlight what Dr. Jallo.
Attention all RMSC Museum and Science Center visitors. The time is now 4:55 p.m. We'd like to inform you that the museum, as well as the museum's gift shop, will be closing in just 5 minutes. If you have any final purchases that you would like to make, we ask that you please do so at this time. Again, the museum and the museum's gift shop will be closing in 5 minutes. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.
So, because we're on time, I don't want to belabor. We have a lot of work to do. Here's what we need from the group. Like, we just spent 2 days with principals and leaders talking about the importance of grade level, those guiding principles you heard me say, grade level instruction, using the materials as we laid out for them, how we lay out for them. So when they call you all and go, Dr. Black told me I can't use my favorite thing, you gotta go, is it this? And I'm saying to you not to remove your authority or knowledge. I'm gonna give you the scripts to questions. Is it this? Is it this? Okay, well, we're not doing that, right? And there's not really a gray area. Is it grade level? Is it accessible? It's not really a gray area. So that's what I'm gonna need from you all, right? To hold the bar at what we are expecting adults to do with children every day. Because when we start to push them out of their comfort zone, which we've already made decisions to do so, they are gonna buck and buck hard. Not because they don't want to, because no one comes to work and says, I don't want to do right by children, because there is fear or change of lack of know-how, and that's, you know, to kind of insulate us from that, because we're pushing hard. And the leaders who have been with us for the last 2 days, they are at least able to speak it in a way that, and they have said it, that this feels so different than what has been happening for a long time. So that's what I'm gonna need from you all. So when you're gonna get the first round of pushback on the assessments, the last blitz and the battle with that is coming back, or using already is coming back. They've already said they're coming back. And I need you all to go, wait a minute, is it grade level? Does it give you data? Like, what's the real issue? And Elizabeth is solving the words about why people are pushing so hard on why these children can't be in green. Because there's some underlying reason why these babies can't be in green. Until we change that, we're losing a whole lot of real.
Yeah. And can I say,
Solutions.
well, can I just ask a quick, I just wanted to finish up the comment I was making before it started. I wanted to say how much I really like the iReady. Are we still being recorded or no? Okay.
We're still live meeting.
Okay. So what I wanted to say is I think this is a really great program that we have now for our district to assess all of our students in all of our buildings, because we have so many different boutique style programming that are taking place. And I think we make a lot of assumptions at times about what's happening in different schools. And I know that if one of my own kids, of my 4 kids in the district, had that sort of identification at the 4th or 5th grade level, she would have passed algebra this year as an 8th grader. Do you know? So like there were some key concepts that were not ingrained at that level, and she missed them. And you know, when someone arrives in 7th and 8th grade and they're still counting on their fingers, something got missed. And so just to highlight the point you were making earlier, Dr. Jallo, is that we have to make sure that we're identifying and helping our teachers and so that they can best help our students, right? And so I think that this is a really valuable program. I wasn't trying to demonize in any way. I recognize the value in it. I think it's sometimes the language that we use around when we present it to the people teaching. There's a lot of defensiveness that can happen, and framing it in a way that helps them be more receptive is always a good thing. But thank you for the work.
All right, so we're going to be finalizing. There is something, though, that I did not want to get missed. On your agendas, at the end, there is a link that's there. You guys are very familiar with the data binders that we provide you all, and they're big and they're clunky, and they change over year by year. The administration and the board staff have really are working towards changing that. So now you have a data archive, and we will send you that link virtually. You click on it, there are different folders that will contain data. The data will not, it will be updated routinely. It's live now, and it's linked to your district Google accounts, but you can also access them without a district Google. You just have to let me know if you need a different Google account to be added.
Attention all RMSC Museum and Science Center visitors. The time is now 5 o'clock p.m. and the museum is now closed. Again, the museum is now closed.
Okay, so, yeah, so please, I was going to do a little demonstration and everything, but when you get that link, please be sure to check out that data. The data, I was talking to President Elliott, it will not, you'll be able to still have the old data in there. So for example, if you get the data now for 21-22, next year the 21-22 data will continue to remain in that folder, so you can compare and contrast, but it will be updated. So you guys have requested suspension data that will be added to the portfolio, but you will no longer get the clunky binders, and this way we can track the data a lot better, okay? If you want to share the data, please first reach out to board staff to find out if it's data that can be shared because of privacy concerns. Depending on what kind of data it is, there's some data that is still in embargo and so will not be available just yet and will be released once it has been released, yeah. But that's the rest of it. This has been your retreat.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. That just shows that, you know, thank you, Dr. Black. Thank you, Callie. Thank you, all the board staff. And this is hard. It's hard to look at this. And we got to get there for these children. So thank you all. Have a great weekend.